Every video you've seen about this budget has been one-sided. Either it's some blue-haired Labour shill telling you this is the greatest housing reform in a generation, or it's a property investor or One Nation supporter screaming about broken promises. Neither of them is actually helping you understand what's going on, and both could be partially correct. So here's what we're going to have a crack at today. I'm going to give the government the strongest possible version of their argument. No cheap shots. Albo's absolute best case. Then I'm going to give the critics the same treatment. Their strongest argument. The numbers they're using. The logic behind it. And then, at the end, I'm going to show you one number. One number that comes directly from the government's own Treasury document. And that number tells you everything you need to know about who's actually right. 5 rounds. Let's go. Round 1. The big one. Will these reforms actually help housing supply or destroy it? The government says the negative gearing changes are specifically designed to direct investment toward new builds, properties that genuinely add to the housing supply. Investors can still negatively gear. They just have to buy new. And the government is backing that up with a $2 billion reduced local infrastructure fund to unlock 65,000 new homes over the next decade. The net effect on housing supply, they say, is positive. That sounds reasonable. So what do the critics reckon? The critics say the government's own Treasury modelling, not the property industry's modelling, not the opposition's modelling, the government's own economists, admits that these reforms will result in 35,000 fewer homes being built over the next decade. Let me say that again. The government's own bloody housing affordability reforms will, according to their own Treasury, result in 35,000 fewer homes being built due to a reduction in overall investor demand. The infrastructure fund is supposed to offset that. But here's the problem. The infrastructure fund is a government spending promise. The 35,000 fewer homes is a market behaviour prediction. One of those things is guaranteed. The other one isn't. Verdict. The government is betting that their spending can outrun the market's reaction to their tax changes. That is a very big bet. And renters are the ones who lose if they're wrong. Round 2. What actually happens to your rent? The government says Treasury modelling projects' rents will rise by less than $2 per week. And they point out that the government has already delivered more than $20 per week in additional Commonwealth rent assistance since 2023. Renters, they say, are net winners from this budget. $2 a week, that's their number. So what do the critics say? The critics reckon that $2 figure is Treasury's best case scenario, not a guarantee. REA Group, the Housing Industry Association, and the Property Council all dispute it. And the mechanism is simple. It's just supply and demand. Fewer investors buying established properties means fewer rental properties available. Fewer rental properties available means landlords can charge more. The rental vacancy rate in Australia is already at historic lows. We are not starting from a position of rental abundance. Any reduction in investor activity makes a tight market tighter. Verdict. The $2 figure is the most disputed number in this entire budget. If you're a renter, do not plan your finances around it. Round 3. And this one surprises people, because most Australians think the family trust changes only affect the wealthy. They don't. The government says the 30% minimum tax on discretionary trusts closes a loophole that overwhelmingly benefits the top 10% of wealth holders. The ability to stream trust income to low-tax beneficiaries including adult children who do nothing to earn it, is a form of tax avoidance that is simply not available to wage earners. The revenue-raised funds a $250 tax cut for every working Australian. This is a direct transfer from wealth to wages. That's a compelling argument. So what do the critics say? The critics say, the bucket company strategy is not just for the wealthy. It is used by hundreds of thousands of Australian farmers, tradies, and small business owners who set up family trusts on the advice of their accountants. The combined effective tax rate through a corporate beneficiary now approaches 55 to 60%. The government has given a 3-year restructure window. But restructuring a trust is expensive, complex, and carries its own tax consequences. Many ordinary Australians are going to be caught completely flat-footed by this. Verdict: if you have a family trust, any family trust, talk to your accountant this week. Not next month, this week. Round 4, and this is the one your financial advisor should be calling you about right now. The government says superannuation has its own tax regime and is appropriately excluded from these changes. The purpose of super is retirement savings, not general wealth accumulation. Excluding super is consistent with the policy's intent to target speculative property investment, not retirement planning. Fair enough. But here's what the critics say. And this is where it gets interesting. The critics say, the exclusion of super has created the largest tax arbitrage in Australian history. Personal capital gains tax on high growth assets now sits at 30% or higher. Super capital gains tax sits at 10%, or 0 in pension phase. The gap between those two numbers has never been wider. Every financial advisor in Australia will now be telling their clients to maximise super contributions and restructure assets into self-managed super funds. This is not a loophole. It is the direct, logical consequence of the government's own policy design. Verdict: if you are not maximising your super contributions right now, you are leaving money on the table. This is the single most actionable move to come out of this entire budget, and the government handed it to you themselves. Round 5, the one that's going to generate the most comments. The government says, governing in the national interest sometimes requires updating policy positions in response to changed circumstances. The housing crisis has worsened significantly. A government that refuses to act because of a pre-election statement is a government that puts politics ahead of people. The OECD, Treasury, and independent economists all support these changes. Sometimes leadership means making hard decisions. That's the argument. Now here's the critics' response. The critics say, Albo did not just update his position, he explicitly, repeatedly, and specifically ruled out changes to negative gearing in the lead-up to the 2025 election. He said the words, on camera, multiple times. Voters, including people who bought investment properties based on those assurances, made financial decisions on the basis of those promises. This is not a policy update. It is a dead-set breach of democratic trust. And if a government can break this promise, it can break any promise. Verdict: whether you support the policy or not, the manner of its introduction has damaged the credibility of government policy commitments for a generation of investors. That damage does not go away when the next election comes around. 5 rounds. Both sides heard. Now here's the number I promised you at the start. It comes directly from the government's own Treasury document, not from the property industry, not from the opposition, from Treasury itself. According to their own modelling, these reforms will result in 35,000 fewer homes being built over the next decade. The government's own housing affordability reforms, the ones specifically designed to help Aussies get into the housing market, will, according to the government's own economists, result in 35,000 fewer homes being built. That is the contradiction at the heart of this entire budget. The government is betting that their infrastructure spending will more than offset the market's response to their tax changes. Maybe it will. But the people who will pay the price, if they're wrong, are not investors. They're not property developers. They're renters. They're first home buyers. The exact people this policy was supposed to help. Both sides have a point. The evidence is genuinely mixed. But when the government's own document contradicts the government's own argument, that's not spin. That's a problem. If you found this useful, share it. Not because I want the views, but because this is exactly the kind of analysis that doesn't make it onto the evening news. The more everyday blokes who understand both sides of this argument, the better the decisions they'll make. Subscribe if you want the intel they don't want you to have. I'll catch you on the next one.